And so the programs that we offer through Iowa Workforce Development and through the local workforce development areas can provide that support to Iowans by paying for training, education, supportive services, all the things that people need to be able to become impactful members of our workforce and to be able to gain employment in jobs that offer them family sustaining wages, right? And hopefully a career path. So that's really what we're trying to do. And it is a difficult problem to solve every day. And so the federal government puts a ton of money into this space. And that's where we sort of come into play, right? And so I have one screen that I'm going to show you that I think sort of in a very confusing way, because it is confusing, illustrates this. But so let me sort of explain the workforce system in general. And really what you have when you look at the workforce system are three levels of involvement. There's federal, state, and local partnerships that come into play. And so really at a federal level, the United States Department of Labor passes money to the state via the governor. On her behalf, Iowa Workforce Development receives that money and administers the funds. And that's what my team does at a statewide level. Now, Linda's team and all of the other people on this call actually work at the local level, which is down here, actually providing direct services to customers, right? And so when we at IWD receive the funding from the Department of Labor, we pass it down to the local workforce development boards. In Iowa, there are currently 6 local workforce development areas. This process started really 5 years ago when we had 15 local workforce development areas in Iowa. They were very small in many cases and very woefully underfunded, because the amount of funding that we get from the Department of Labor in the state of Iowa is around $13 million a year, and it fluctuates. 13 million is probably the highest funding we've had in the last 5 years. And we had to take that and divide it out amongst the number of local boards that there are. Well, when we had 15 local boards, there were some parts of the state, especially in rural Iowa, that were getting such little funding. It was nearly impossible for them, actually not nearly, it was impossible for them to meet all of the requirements of the law and for them to achieve everything that they're trying to achieve. So we started in 2019 at the encouragement of the federal government to realign the local workforce development areas in the state. We did that successfully in 2020. We went from 15 local areas to 9. That included parts of Western Iowa combining into one local workforce development area, while still maintaining some of the smaller local areas in the state. Throughout that time, we've also been very focused on making sure we do things in a compliant way, because when we're dealing with federal funds, there are lots of rules and red tape that dictate how we spend the funds, how the money flows down to make sure that it's being spent appropriately. And what we came to find out was that in the state of Iowa, across the state of Iowa, there were things that had been happening here for years that weren't necessarily correct. So we've been working to fix that. We have finally gotten to that point where we have all of the right people in the right places. The money is flowing the right way. The oversight is happening appropriately, and we're in a good spot. Unfortunately, what that did is it forced some of the smaller local areas in Iowa to really kind of get to that realization that they did not have enough funding to be able to do all of those things successfully. And so this past year, in what is now the Iowa Plains local area, the 4 local areas that previously existed, which was Northwest Iowa, which was sort of the 8 counties along the northern border of the state, North Central, which is the 6 counties sort of surrounding Fort Dodge, Western Iowa, which was a pretty large chunk along the western border, almost down to the southern border, and then Southwest Iowa, which was sort of the 8 counties around the Creston, Sheridan, Osceola area. The chief elected officials, who are the county boards of supervisors in each county, who technically receive the money and are fiscally responsible for the money. In those 42 counties, those chief elected officials decided kind of, you know what, this isn't worth my time or effort. We aren't seeing the return on our investment, we don't believe, so we don't want the money anymore. At a high level, that's basically what happened. They said, we don't want to be involved. So they refused receiving the funds locally. And because they refused to receive the funds locally down here, the funding stays up here with the state. I'm trying to draw with my mouse. So technically, the governor now is the chief elected official for that 42 county area in western Iowa that we call Iowa Plains. And it's her responsibility to make sure that those services are happening. Well, I don't know if you know, but she's pretty busy, so she's not doing that on a daily basis. And what happened is it fell to Iowa Workforce Development to do that, because continuity of service and ensuring that the citizens of the Iowa Plains local workforce area are still receiving these services is the most important thing. So that's where all the lovely people on this call come into play. They are providing these services on a daily basis to Iowans, making this funding available, enrolling them into training, whether that be going to, a community college or some sort of a training school, doing on-the-job training, doing registered apprenticeship, in whatever way it works for those customers to receive that training and education they need. They are providing those services. And so when the governor keeps the money, typically what happens is the person that the entity that is responsible for the money has to appoint a workforce development board. It's required under the federal law. And when the chief elected officials were receiving the money, they appointed a local workforce development board. Those chief elected officials appointed that board to be that strategic body to sort of dictate what the workforce system should look like in that local area. Well, in the Iowa Plains, there is no chief elected officials. The chief elected official is the governor, and the governor already has a workforce development board. It's the state workforce development board, right? Because that's the board that the governor appoints to do all of the same things that are happening locally, but they just do it at a statewide level. So how do we ensure that this sort of notion of local control, meaning that, Sarah and Kristen, you live and work in Iowa Plains on a daily basis. You know what types of skills are needed. You know what jobs are available and where we should be focusing our efforts in Iowa Plains, because what's happening in Iowa Plains is very different from what's happening in Des Moines or, say, Burlington or Davenport, right? And so this notion of local control is very important to the success of the system. So the State Workforce Development Board is made up of business leaders like yourself from across the state who are looking at this from a statewide perspective, right? So in order to ensure that even though it's the State Workforce Development Board's responsibility to sort of run the Iowa Plains local area on behalf of the governor, most of the people on the state board are not from these 42 county areas, right? There are a few, but not most of them. And so the solution to that is to stand up a committee of the State Workforce Development Board that can act as the local workforce development board for Iowa Plains. Typically, on a local workforce development board and a state workforce development board, the composition is dictated by federal law. And the federal law requires that the majority, or 51% of the board members, are business. And that is very intentional and very important because, again, you as the business leaders in the area know what is going on. You know what the in-demand industry sectors are. You know what types of skills people need to be successful in the jobs that you have available. You know what type of training it requires to gain those skills. And so you should be the loudest voice at the table. You should be the ones saying, this is where we want our money to go. This is how we want it to be spent. This is who we want to serve. All of those things should be being led by business, because business should always be at the forefront when we're talking about workforce, right? It shouldn't be education saying, well, we have, I'm going to make words up that might not be true, so just go with me here. But, we have a TIG welding class and we can train a bunch of people in TIG welding. But Sarah, you say, but I don't need TIG welders. I need MIG welders, right? And so you should be, as a business, at the front of that saying, this is what we need. And then the education providers in your area should be responding to that. And if the businesses are collectively saying, we need MIG welders, well, then the education provider should be working to provide you the training that you need to build that workforce, right? And so that's why we want business to be at the forefront of this discussion and to be the main focus of this committee. So I think Linda asked you guys all here today as business members of the community in Iowa Plains to learn a little bit about this and what this opportunity is, and provide you some background information about being able to be a member of that committee of the board. Now, a couple of additional pieces, because it's a committee of the state board, it is not as formal as being an actual local workforce development board in and of itself. So it is truly the state board that has to make, oops, I just went forward on my thing accidentally. I think, wait, that's not where it was. Well, it doesn't really matter. I think I was done with that anyway. I'll stop sharing. The State Workforce Development Board is the actual board and entity with authority to make decisions. So as a committee member, what you will do is work together and function just like a local workforce development board would, setting policies, setting a budget, setting the strategic vision for the Iowa Plains local workforce development area, but then bringing that back to the full State Workforce Development Board for them to vote and approve. Another thing that I would stress is that this is not something you do alone as business members. All of the people on this team, on this call that work in the Iowa Plains area and are serving customers directly are there to support you. They have been hard at work for the past 6 months, already drafting policies and procedures and all of the documents that need to exist for a local workforce board to help sort of get this off the ground, right? But now what they need is that business voice to say, are we on the right path? Is this really what we want to do? Should we tweak this? Should we tweak that? All of those things. So it's a group effort. It's not just business members. There are other program staff. There are other education partners that will participate as a part of the committee as well. But the most important thing being that all of the members of that committee are from the Iowa Plains local workforce development area, right? So that we don't have somebody from Davenport deciding what's happening in Western Iowa. And I think, does that cover everything you wanted me to cover, Linda?
I think so, Michelle. Thank you.
Yeah.
Maybe just the opportunity to ask any questions they may have.
Absolutely.
Before yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so I mean, I know this is sort of a crash course, and let me tell you, this is complicated stuff that takes a long time to truly understand. And I know this was just the introductory meeting, but the only other thing I would stress before you ask any questions is that this is a great team. They are doing a phenomenal job of picking up the pieces of something that they found out about April 1st they were going to be in charge of and started doing on July 1, and are already making great progress in how we serve people in Western Iowa. So there's a great team of people to support you in this work if you choose to go forward with them. So don't be intimidated. I promise it can be a really fulfilling body of people to be a part of and work to do. So I would love to answer any questions you have.
Michelle, I'll ask a question if that's okay. So
Yeah.
I'm just looking at the people that are on the call right now, the list of names, and I'm seeing IWD after almost everybody except for it looks like Sarah and Stephanie. So this board or this group that you've put together, the committee, whatever you call it, I should say. So it's basically a large group of people from IWD who's going to be in connection with like Stephanie and Sarah and I to kind of direct what you had been referring to. Does that sound right?
A little bit. So full disclaimer, Stephanie also works for IWD. So Kristen and Sarah are the only members right now. I know Linda invited many other business members from Iowa Plains, and this morning, I think she said she got 4 notices of something came up because we know that happens, right? But no, the committee will be majority business members. So people who work in businesses in the Iowa Plains local area who are in a leadership role, such as yourselves, that can help sort of steer the strategic vision of the area. The people on this call that work for IWD, probably one of them will actually sit on the committee with you to represent the programs. The rest of them will be here to provide the support that you need to actually get the work done, because this is a volunteer opportunity, right? We know you have a full-time job that probably already takes more than 40 hours a week, as we all do, right? And so they are going to support the work of the board. So if the board says, we want a policy that says we're going to, pay X amount of dollars to send people to welding school, then these are the people on the call that would actually draft that policy for the board. and then bring it to you and say, okay, here's our draft. What do you want changed? How do you want us to tweak this? Those types of things, right? So most of these people are going to be in a support role for the board. Probably one of them will sit on the actual committee with you all, along with probably somebody that represents probably one of the community colleges in the local area, right, in Iowa Plains, because the community colleges are a huge partner to the work that we do and provide much of the training for our customers. Linda, who am I forgetting, or anybody, I guess, who am I forgetting about other seats on the board? Potentially like an economic development person from somewhere in Iowa Plains that can also help make that connection. Community-based organizations that are also a large part of the workforce, possibly like a union representative. Like there are a lot of different groups of people that we can pull from. This initial meeting was specific to the business partners, because again, having that business lead is just such a huge important piece of the composition of the board.
So
Thank
can I
you,
ask
Michelle.
how many seats are actually on the board total?
Well, that's a great question. So typically in a local workforce development board, there are 19 members. Now, because the state workforce development board is technically the board that oversees the Iowa Plains, and this is just a committee, we have some leeway on how we want to seat that board, right? So it could be as large or as small as we need it to be, depending on how many interested parties there are, especially from the business side. I do think it's important to maintain that majority business so that the business is the loudest voice in the room. So I think that, and Linda, please dive in here, but I think that once we know how many business members we can get, then we'll be able to fill in some of those other seats. And just because somebody's not a member of the committee does not mean they can't be consulted or brought in for their expertise when it is needed, right? So I would say probably somewhere between 10 to 19 people.
Okay. So then my next question, and honestly, bear with me, like
Yeah.
I would ask in advance for a little grace, because I'm working through some grant programs right now here at CountryMade, and the compliance aspect is nearly overwhelming. I'm curious, like, what sort of, is there any like fiscal fiduciary responsibility being a member?
Absolutely. So you have no personal liability or fiscal responsibility. Essentially what happens, and Linda, correct me if I'm wrong, but Iowa Plains as a local area receives a little less than $2 million annually in its budget. And so fiscally, what the board will help do, or what the committee, sorry, I have to correct myself too and talk about this correctly. What this committee will do is help to establish that budget, right? And at a high level, because the committee / board is very much meant to be a strategic partner in setting that vision. So I like to use sort of crazy extreme examples. But for example, in Iowa Plains, if we think about the 42 counties sort of west of Des Moines from north to south, northern border to southern border, we all could assume that the in-demand industry sectors in that part of the state are construction, probably a little bit of advanced manufacturing, maybe not as much as on the eastern side of the state. Hospitality, especially when you get up in the northwest corner, right? You have like all the lakes and all those things. Agriculture, right? So you have these in-demand industry sectors. So what a board will do, what this committee will do, is set a strategic vision about how you want to spend the money to impact those in-demand industry sectors, right? So if a customer comes in and says that they want to go to cosmetology school, is that something you want the money spent on? Yes or no? If somebody says, I want to be an astronaut, is that something you're willing to spend your money on? Probably not, because you know that even if you pay for them to go to astronaut school in Sioux City, the probability of them staying in Sioux City to get a job is like slim to none. They're going to move to Florida to be an astronaut. And in the long run, that does not impact or improve the economy and the workforce of the Iowa Plains local area, right? So the committee is there to set that sort of strategic boundaries of how the money is spent and set the budget at a high level. So $2 million, again, this is super high level, but 10% of that can be set aside to pay for administrative costs. The rest of it is considered programmatic and needs to be spent on providing services. So that could be, I'll look at Faith and say, it could be partly paying Faith's salary because she is providing direct career services and case management to a participant. That's a perfectly acceptable cost and probably one of the largest costs, quite honestly, paying for the career planners to interact and provide services. But maybe the local area wants to set a policy that says, listen, of our $2 million, we take out the 200,000, we have 1.8 million left on direct services. We want to make sure 25% of that is spent on actually paying for tuition for people to be enrolled into training, right? Setting policy that drives how the local area serves people is where the board and this committee comes into play. So it's at that high strategic level that you're involved in setting budgets and things like that. When it comes down to the nitty-gritty of the spreadsheets and stuff, Linda and her team, the IWD fiscal team, are going to be doing that day-to-day work and bringing it to you and saying, okay, here's an example budget. Is this what you like? Is this where you want to go? Is it not? And tweaking it. So I think it's important to be honest and say upfront, because Iowa Plains is such a new local area. There is a lot of work to be done, right? There are a lot of new policies that need to be written and approved and all those things. But Omar, Stephanie, Linda, her team, they've been working on those drafts for months already. And they have a great starting place for you all. It's just getting this committee in place to like take it to the next step.
So then I think my next question is pretty easy, but I have a bigger one following that.
Yeah.
If you said, I'm sorry, I didn't catch it, how many local areas are there in the state?
There are 6 currently. Iowa
Okay.
Plains being the 6th. Yep.
So then about my only other question is, either on a monthly basis or annually, what is the investment of time that you feel like is necessary to truly have an impact?
Yeah. I think typically a local workforce development board is meeting quarterly, right? I think, and it's probably a couple hours long. It depends on the agenda. I do believe that for Iowa Plains in the beginning, the commitment may be a little bit bigger than that. It might require a monthly meeting for a couple of months to get some of these initial policies established and budgets established and things like that. But once that initial work is done, I think quarterly seems to work for most local areas. Yes. But that also will be totally up to the group and how involved they want to be and how hands-on they want to be realistically. Linda, do you agree with that?
I do, Michelle. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we do have a lot of work to do. And Sarah and Kristen, thank you so much for joining today. There was about 15 employers that were going to try to make the meeting. So if you'll notice, we did record it and we're going to put it on the Iowa Plains website after we receive the recording back. We do want to, like Michelle has so eloquently said, we really want the employers to be involved. From the governor down in Iowa, we're hearing so much about work-based learning opportunities. And there's so many opportunities in Iowa Plains, from registered apprenticeship opportunities to on-the-job training to work experience program, that we really want to expand that through Iowa Plains. But that really takes the employers to help us out with that and figure out what that looks like in Iowa Plains. So I know Michelle has to drop off. She has another commitment. Are there any other questions for Michelle specifically? And then we can talk for a few more minutes about where do we go from here.
The only other thing I would add too is that this again was just a high level introduction. We are fully intended to support this committee as much as possible. So once we have the committee set, we will be doing more formal training and providing more information to help everybody feel comfortable in that role, because it is a commitment, and anybody who's willing to make it wants to do a good job, and we know that. So that support will be there, not only from my team, but Linda's team as well. As you can see how many people we have on the call today that this is what they do all day long, right? And at the end of the day, it's about serving people in Iowa Plains and making sure they have the opportunities that are available to them. And that's what we're all here for. So yeah, I really appreciate you guys joining again today as well. And Linda has my information and can share it with you if you have any other questions, just in general even, or about your own businesses. We're here to help. So it was great to meet you. And I'm sure we'll talk again, hopefully. So I do have to run though. Thank you guys. Bye.
Thank you, Michelle.
Bye.
Appreciate you. Thanks. So I'm going to try to turn my camera on again, and hopefully I'll be able to stay on and see everybody. So I apologize for the rough start. I'm in the office and had connectivity issues, but I think it's important that everybody understands the rules too between Michelle and myself. We do have a firewall agreement. Like Michelle says, her and her team provide technical assistance to all of the local areas and all of the boards over Title I. So when we refer to Title I, again, we're talking Title I adult dislocated worker services, as well as in-school and out-of-school youth. So they both have their own eligibility criteria on every program, just like any other federal program does. And that's where my team really comes into play. So Teresa Larson-White, she oversees the program as well as service delivery for Title I. We have 10 career planners in all of our centers in Iowa Plains currently that are providing all of those services to all of those customers. So as of right now, we don't have it broken down where a career planner just does adult or just does dislocated worker or just does youth. They have all been trained at all aspects of Title I. My other managers that are on the call, Faith, Andy, and Randall, they're the regional managers or operations managers that really oversee the operations in each of those IowaWORKS centers and ensures that we're all working together as an integrated center. So all of the programs, and I apologize because I don't know how much you both know about our service delivery or all of the programs that we offer in our IowaWORKS center, but it's very important that we provide integrated services. So Title I is working with Jobs for Veterans State Grant. Those are our veteran services. And our Promise Jobs program is our TANF, Transitional Assistance for Needy Families, that we're co-enrolling and we're working together. And of course, we have our Title II Adult Ed partners, as well as our Title IV, our vocational rehab partners as well. As well as many centers have additional required partners that are also in the centers providing services to our customers. So as Michelle stated, we started this July 1st, and we have been progressing. One of the biggest goals for us is to do more outreach, increase caseloads, and provide services to Iowans. We know that we have a large number of people that are coming into our centers, but we also realize that we need to do outreach to find customers, to find Iowans where they are that may not know about all of the great services that we can provide through the Title I program. And the other distinction real quick for both of you is to understand. So Stephanie and Omar are our workforce services team. So they are my program coordinators. So Michelle has her program coordinators, but they're my program coordinators to provide technical assistance, to provide training to our customers. Omar has a great youth program background. He's done a lot of work with youth. And Stephanie has been previously in our center providing Promise Jobs. So she had a wealth of knowledge on our case management system and how to document services. And then Teresa, thank goodness she joined my leadership team not too long ago. She brings a wealth of Title I services and leadership through Title I program. So this team working together is going to be phenomenal in providing services and then helping support this committee as we move forward. So I'm going to stop talking again and let you guys ask any other additional questions, and then we can talk about where do we go from here.
I think I'm good. Did you have any other questions, Sarah?
No, it's all making sense.
Okay, thank you. So unless you guys object, I know we have holidays coming up and it's a busy time for everybody. I would like to try a follow-up meeting in December, maybe mid-December, to hopefully get, more of the employers on board, maybe invite in a couple of economic developers, community-based organizations, so that by, January, maybe we can start having those quarterly meetings. The other thing that we can do is once we get a few more employers and team members involved in this, we'll share out all of the policies that we have developed so far, to give you kind of an overview of where we're at. And then hopefully you'll be able to provide some additional direction on where you would like to see us go within Iowa Plains. Does that sound good to both of you? Okay. So for my team, anything else to add or? Okay. All right. Well, again, thank you for both of you for joining today. What I'll do is I'm going to send out email to all of the employers who I invited. I'll put the recording on there and then we'll post it to the Iowa Plains. And then we'll look at some dates for December. Is there any one day that you both can agree on that either works really well or doesn't work at all for you?
Just
I
looking
would
at my
ask
calendar.
not the first week. The first week is
Okay.
kind of ugly.
Okay.
Once we get past that, I'm good.
Mine is pretty open, other than obviously meetings kind of spread out here and there. Mondays tend to be a little sketchy for me as far as having new hires starting and doing orientation and things like that. So Mondays tend to be a little bit sketchier for me anyway.
Okay. Yeah. I'm not a fan of Mondays myself, so we'll stay away from Mondays.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, again, I appreciate you jumping on and joining, and I appreciate you volunteering because this is a huge undertaking, as Michelle said. It's a 42 county area. So my biggest concerns, going into this is again, making sure that we're reaching out to Iowans because we know there's a need out there. The other thing I want to do is, as we move forward, is share with you all some of the team members that are on boots on the ground providing services. I think it's important for this committee to hear from them, as well as some of the other programs as well. So, and our success stories, because I know we've got a few brewing that I'm really excited about. We've been, we're doing the WIOWA goals and we're being very innovative and creative on how we're providing our services. So, all right. Well, with that said, again, I appreciate everybody joining, and happy holidays to everyone. And I look forward to seeing you again in December.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
everyone.
All right. Bye-bye.